It's May 1964. Two physicists, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson, stand beside a scientific instrument the size of a truck on a New Jersey hillside. They've pointed this giant horn antenna at the sky to map radio waves, but wherever they aim it, they hit a wall of static, a persistent, uniform hiss. This is a map of the cosmic microwave background. Penzias and Wilson eliminated every local source of interference, including pigeon droppings inside the antenna, before realizing that this hiss was the echo of the Big Bang. The extreme uniformity of this heat map proved that at the exact moment of its birth, our universe was astonishingly, elegantly simple. Today, we take that simplicity for granted, but for most of human history, looking up at the night sky meant looking into a convoluted, intellectually suffocating trap. Before we could hear the clean echo of the Big Bang, we first had to survive the absolute mess of early human science and dismantle the most bloated academic structure ever conceived. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Science, in the modern sense, did not exist. Instead, scholars studied scientia, a rigid hybrid of Greek astronomy and Christian theology. Placing Earth at the center broke celestial math. To fix wandering planets, astronomers stacked invisible spheres and spinning epicycles. Then came teleology. Rocks fell and planets orbited strictly to fulfill a predetermined future programmed by God. The ultimate layer of clutter came from theologians like Thomas Aquinas, who championed the idea of universals. Under this logic, every physical object is crammed with invisible, floating essences. A simple cherry supposedly contained the separate universal essences of roundness, redness, and sweetness. This bloated physics allowed the church to mathematically justify miracles. During communion, bread could physically turn into flesh while still tasting like bread, because the essence of breadness was simply transferred to a new category. Religion operated as a rigid physical science. By inventing an infinite number of magical spheres, future goals, and invisible essences, medieval scholars could retroactively explain any phenomenon. But a system that explains everything predicts absolutely nothing. Scientia was a dead end. Enter William of Ockham. He was a 14th century Franciscan friar studying at Oxford, and he looked at this tangled web of spheres and essences and decided to cut it down. His core principle was devastatingly direct. It is vain to do with more what can be done with less. First, he took his razor to universals. Ockham argued that floating essences do not exist. Words like redness or roundness are just invented names we use to group things. If you want to know if a man is mortal, you don't debate his essence. You fire an arrow at him and observe the physical result. Second, he completely severed teleology. Ockham argued that things happen entirely because of immediate past actions. Fire heats wood because that is its immediate physical nature, not because it is striving toward a divine target. Finally, the master cut. Ockham argued that an omnipotent God is infinite, making him unknowable through human reason. Therefore, empirical observation and religious faith belong in completely separate boxes. Science and theology are incompatible. By demanding we use the absolute minimum number of entities to explain reality, Ockham stripped the cosmos of its supernatural padding. In doing so, he shattered the church's monopoly. By streamlining physics, Ockham weaponized logic against the ultimate geopolitical authority of his century. Pope John XXII recognized the threat immediately. Ockham had destroyed the physics of miracles and undercut papal authority. The furious pope summoned him to Avignon and charged him with heresy. Facing inquisitors and held under house arrest, Ockham and a small group of friars slipped out of the papal city in the dead of night. They fled downriver on galleys with a posse of papal soldiers actively hunting them. If caught, Ockham faced excommunication and a slow death on a burning pyre. The entire logical framework of empirical, secular science was sitting in that boat, and it would have burned right alongside him. The bedrock of modern reasoning, the logic that eventually allows us to build rockets and study galaxies, survived strictly because one fugitive managed to outrun a medieval hit squad. Safely in exile, Ockham documented his third way. He established the framework where a person could remain devoutly religious while practicing entirely secular, empirical science. And his razor kept cutting. Ockham applied his logic to politics, arguing that ownership and earthly dominion aren't handed down by God. They are simply subjective rights. human inventions designed to manage resources and avoid conflict. This view of property and power crossed centuries to directly influence the Enlightenment. It formed the philosophical spine for modern democratic laws, establishing that the authority of rulers comes from the people they rule. Cutting away divine interference freed the stars from their crystal spheres. Eventually, that exact same logic freed humanity from the absolute dominion of kings and emperors. Which brings us back to May 1964, and two physicists standing beside a giant ear trumpet in New Jersey. When Penzias and Wilson detected the cosmic background radiation, they didn't invent new deities or invisible spheres to explain the noise. They looked for the simplest possible answer, using a tool forged by a renegade friar 6 centuries earlier. True progress, whether you're mapping the origins of the universe, engineering a circuit, or designing a society, rarely comes from adding complexity. It comes from ruthlessly cutting away the noise until only the truth remains.